Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. Episode 154, The Hunted.
Welcome into another episode of Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. I'm John Champion.
And I'm your genetically enhanced, mission-specific, and very dangerous co-host, Ken Ray.
Each week on Mission Log, we pick apart a single episode of Star Trek, and we're talking about all the episodes ever made of every series, and the movies. And then we pick each one apart, looking for morals, meanings, messages, the ethics, the philosophy, what makes it tick. This week, we're talking about The Hunted.
And then, when we're done, I'll be sent back to the colony with the other genetically enhanced podcasters, waiting to do it all again next week. That is, if they can catch me. In the meantime, you can catch us a few different ways. Mission Log Pod is the address to find us on Facebook, Skype, and Twitter. This is if you want to send letters for my release, or just thoughts on any episode that we have. You can call us, 323-522-5641. That number again, 323-522-5641. Our email address is missionlog@roddenberry.com. Our show website, including discovered documents and all kinds of other fun stuff, is at missionlogpodcast.com. And please do remember, we may use your comments on an upcoming episode of Mission Log. And just a little bit of advice: don't send any threatening messages. Just, that's from me to you. Everything goes fine if you don't, and if you do, I don't like to think about it. There's one thing though that I like to think about, but not as much as John Champion does, and that is, of course, little Star Trek trivia.
All right. So, Ken, today's episode is directed by Cliff Bull, and we have talked about Cliff many, many times. So let's spend a little time talking about the writer. Now, The Hunted was written by Robin Bernheim, who's actually not Robin Bernheim. That's a nom de plume for Robin Jill Berger. Robin had worked her way up the ranks on such 80s TV shows as Remington Steele, Matlock, MacGyver, before writing this episode of Next Gen.
MacGyver?
Yeah.
Because there's a little bit of a MacGyver feel in this episode.
There is a little bit of a MacGyver feel.
Yeah.
That's kind of appropriate, right? Now, like we've seen so far, though, there are other hands in the creative process here. So Michael Piller, of course, had a lot of influence driving this script. And it's time for us to say hello to a new name that will become very familiar over time, Ira Steven Behr. His first job on Star Trek as a staff writer was a rewrite on The Hunted, and he is credited amongst that writing staff with most of the act in which Danar is trying to escape the Enterprise. Now, don't worry about Robin. We'll hear more from her later, just not on The Next Generation. So who is this Ira Steven Behr? Well, he's a playwright from New York, and he moved to L.A. to write comedies rather than use his playwriting scholarship at Brandeis University. He didn't so much write comedies, but he found a niche with drama and came into Next Gen knowing nothing of that show, but knowing the original series pretty well. We'll talk more about Ira's tenure at Next Gen later, and we'll catch up with him again down the road when we talk more about Deep Space Nine. Now, a couple of effects notes in here. That is a new matte painting we're seeing here for Angosia 3, meaning that it wasn't recycled from another show, though it looks reminiscent of paintings that we've seen on other sci-fi cityscapes. And it won't turn up again. This is a one-off for that matte painting. And if you're paying close attention to such things, you'll notice that we have a new set for the brig. The square doorway has now gained some interesting angles, and there is more detail on the walls. And hey, this brig has a sink. Very exciting for anybody thrown in that brig. And if you're watching the remastered high-def version of this episode, you can actually stop and read the record on Danar. So the blurry screen of gibberish text and numbers is replaced here by an actual bio. One line is pretty funny. It states, Roga Danar's first assignment was guard duty at Kevskati Military Base. Now, Kevin Scotty is from CBS Digital, and his name also shows up as one of Claire Raymond's descendants in the Neutral Zone. And you'll find a lot of other names like that if you look very closely. So Jeff McCarthy played Danar. He got his start in New York performing on Broadway, then came back to his native California, where he has worked successively in TV guest star roles. He started out with The Equalizer, and he's appeared in such shows as L.A. Law, Law and Order, Designing Women, Cheers. He will be back for more Star Trek very briefly. Stick around a few years when we return to the Delta Quadrant for that. And finally, towering at nearly 6'7", James Cromwell appears here as Prime Minister Narok. Cromwell is so well known, it feels a little weird to try to sum up his career in the quick glance that is our trivia section. I find it interesting that he is an outspoken political activist and animal rights activist. Some of his earliest TV work was on All in the Family, followed by Mary Hartman, MASH, Three's Company. He's played a U.S. president multiple times, two of the real-life ones being LBJ and George Bush I. He's also played other historical figures like Charles Keating, and he played William Randolph Hearst in RKO 281. His first and so far only Academy Award nomination came in 1996 for his role in the movie Babe, and he won an Emmy for his time on American Horror Story, which is quite deserved because it was pretty damn creepy.
That's a tremendous amount of stuff.
Yeah.
And I know Star Trek has a tendency to, they find somebody good, they'll get him back.
Mm-hmm.
Will we ever see James Cromwell on Star Trek again?
I have no idea.
So, that guy. Is he not the one who was first to achieve warp drive on Earth?
Prologue. Angosha 3 would like admission into the Federation, and the Enterprise is there to give them the once-over. Picard and Riker are getting a tour from Prime Minister Narok, who is totally not Zephram Cochrane. Especially impressive, the ability of Angosha 3 to recover from the Tarsian War. Prime Minister Narok's like, yeah, that is impressive, isn't it? See, we're thinkers, not fighters, though not every culture feels that way. He and Picard reach. The development of the mind, the cultivation of the intellect, these are the pursuits to which Angosians have dedicated themselves for centuries. Prime Minister Narok steps away for a moment, giving Riker and Picard a second to chat. Picard thinks Angosha 3 will fit right in with the Federation, though Riker thinks it's a little bit stuffy. Upon his return, Prime Minister Narok says a prisoner has escaped from the colony on Lunar 5. 2 guards are dead. The guy got a ship and got away, and golly gee, Picard, we just don't have what it takes to catch up with him. With the go-ahead from the captain, Riker sets the Enterprise on finding and catching the guy. Commander Data says finding him is no problem. Worf does that almost as soon as it's mentioned. Catching him, though, he's playing a really good game of hide and don't find. Commander Data informs Riker and Picard that the prisoner has eluded the Enterprise. Act 1. Back aboard the Enterprise, Riker and Picard are overseeing the pursuit of Roga Danar, identified now as the escapee. His criminal record is too long to go into, according to the Prime Minister, though Narok warns Picard that Danar is prone to bouts of uncontrollable violence. Dude's also wicked smart. So far, he's managed to steal a ship, escape in that ship's drive section, which goes about as fast as a Model A, then hide that ship without anyone knowing how, all while eluding sensor scans for life readings. Now he's using the magnetic pole of Angosha 3 to hang out without anyone noticing it. Well, until Riker realizes that's probably what he's doing. Data recalibrates ship's sensors, and there he is. Well, there's the drive section. Still no life readings, though. The Enterprise locks a tractor beam on the drive section, but, wow, this is nuts. The guy is actually gunning it toward the Enterprise. His piece of a ship bounces off the Enterprise shields, and Picard orders the whole drive section beamed aboard. But Data says don't bother. Danar is no longer in the drive section. It fits the pattern. He's probably in an even smaller ship, and sure enough, he is. It's an escape pod. Though still no life readings. Picard orders Transporter Chief O'Brien to beam anything big enough to be a guy from the escape pod to the Enterprise. O'Brien gives the okie dokie and starts the transporter, holding Danar in stasis until security can get there. He's also detected a weapon in the transport, though that's been rendered inoperative. So Danar just goes about disarming the 2-man security team and O'Brien with his bare hands, shrugging off stuns from phasers as he goes. Eventually, Worf and Riker are able to subdue Danar and get him to a detention cell. Act 2. Prime Minister Narok, totally not Zephram Cochrane, says they'll need a few hours to fix what Danar broke during his escape. If the Enterprise could hold him for a few hours, Yeah, that'd be great. He also says prison psychologists suggest sedating Danar. He is dangerous. Picard says they'll look after him. Riker wants to know whether Data has run a check on the ship's sensors. He has, and they're fine. The Enterprise didn't pick up any life readings off of Danar because he has none. Oh, he's there, and he's alive, but somehow he's hiding his life signs. But he can't hide his feelings. Well, not all of them. And not from Counselor Troi. She gets seriously troubled vibes off of Danar as he sleeps fitfully in his cell. She goes to talk to Danar, where we begin to learn a bit about him. Yes, he killed people to get away from Lunar 5. A terrifying thought, even to him. She senses that going back there scares him too, though he's not mistreated there. Food, clothing, shelter, comfort. He's actually well treated there. It's just that he can never leave. Also, he really doesn't like Counselor Troi. He parries her queries with falsehoods and games, accusing her of being a mind control expert. She says that's not what she is. She's there because she sensed he was in pain. So they're both surprised to find that now his pain is gone. Talking it over with Captain Picard, Troi says something's not right. It's almost like Danar is two people. She knows about his crimes. He knows about his crimes. And he hates them. But somehow it's not him. Well, Picard says he'll be the problem of Angosia 3 again in a few hours, and Picard will be happy about that. Troi says she gets it, but she's still on the case. She asks Data to access Roga Danar's police record. He has none. A criminal like that with no police record? Data says Lunar 5 is actually a military prison. Looking over his military record, this guy was good. He even achieved many high-level citations. So what's he doing in jail? Troi goes back to talk to Danar. You were a non-violent person. What did you do to end up in jail? His answer? Everything he was told to do. This made him a menace to society as far as society was concerned. He was conditioned to do whatever he had to for the war. Conditioned by a counselor, by the way, so good choice on that title. Act 3. Troi, Riker, Picard, and Dr. Crusher are talking over Roga Danar. He was an idealistic young man who answered his planet's call of duty, to fight to protect the Angosian way of life. But they turned him into a war machine, physically and mentally, all the way down to a cell structure that can fool sensors. A machine that, when the war was over, had no place in their society. He's actually perfectly fine as long as he perceives no threat. If he perceives a threat, though, he's conditioned to negate that threat, or survive it, at any cost. And Lunar 5 is not a prison. Well, not for criminals, anyway. Rather, it's where the Angosian government sent its soldiers when the war was over. No attempt to recondition them was made. When they came back tweaked from the war, the Angosian government simply sent them away. Data goes to talk over the situation with Danar. The android sees similarities between the two. Both have been programmed. But Data's programming can be altered. Cannot Danar's? Danar assumes not. I mean, if they could fix me, wouldn't they? In his ready room, Picard is talking over Danar's assertions with the Prime Minister. Look, Lunar 5 is not a prison. It's a colony, says Narok. A colony built for the protection of the soldiers, and society, off-planet, with security. But it's not a prison. Yeah, says Picard, except it's a prison. Picard says his people think there might be help for Danar and people like him, though Narok says, no, there isn't. And now, you are treading on matters of internal security. We're on our way to pick up Danar. Thanks for your help. Narok out. Data and Danar are still talking over the soldiers' situation when Picard and Troi come in. Picard wanted to let Danar know face-to-face that he has no choice but to turn Danar back over to the Angosian government. Thanks, says Danar, and don't worry. You're right to get rid of me. There is no place for me in a civilized society. Troi and Data disagree. Picard says he trusts his officers, but his hands are tied. Oh, says Danar, you should know, I'm going to do whatever I have to do to get away. And of course, once the Angosians try to retake possession, get away is exactly what Danar does. Act 4. The Enterprise is on lockdown. Danar is gone, and a phaser is missing. It is an elaborate game of cat and mouse. A fairly tense one, too. And despite having numbers and technology, the Enterprise is outclassed. Danar was made for this, in a manner of speaking. It's an exciting chase, and one that ends with Danar beaming to the Angosian transport ship, overpowering its crew, and getting away. Act 5. Danar wasn't looking to get away. He was just looking to get away from the Enterprise. He takes the Angosian transport ship back to Lunar 5, where he frees the other Angosian super soldiers, and now they are headed toward the Angosian capital city. Prime Minister Nayrock tells Picard that he and his people are not prepared to deal with the prisoners. That's why the prisoners were actually created in the first place. Picard says he'll detach an away team, but when it arrives on the planet, it consists of Troy, Data, Worf, and Picard. Prime Minister Nayrock is incredulous. This is all you've brought? These soldiers are on their way here. They're dangerous. Time now for a Kirk speech. From Captain Picard and the rest of the away team. You are dangerous. You made them the way they are. Did you even try to unmake them? Did you tell them how risky this would be for them? They're your brothers. Your sons. Look, maybe we could have fixed them, but it would have cost a lot of money, and the people voted and decided to send them away instead. Here's the thing, though. They're back, and a serious standoff is underway. The peaceful citizens of Angosia 3 are armed, though they've not raised their weapons. Good thing, too. If the soldiers perceive a threat, they'll kill them. Well, says Picard, this looks like a good time for us to leave. The end. Seriously, that's the end. Picard's like, you made this mess, and now you seriously have to clean it up. If you ever do, the Federation will be happy to reconsider your application for admittance. Aboard the Enterprise, Picard says if the Angosian government makes it through the night, the Federation will offer whatever aid is required to rehabilitate the soldiers. And this time, that's really the end.
Double ending. I love it.
Double ending. Boom, boom.
When that happens.
I love that. Yeah. I thought about actually just ending it right there. And like, so Picard's like, we're out. The end.
See you guys.
Because it's pretty much true. As far as the Angosians are concerned, that's what happened.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, when they do the follow-up episode, then we'll get to see everything that happened in the interim.
Here's the thing.
Okay.
In the original series, I know that would never happen, but I also know that I don't remember every Next Gen series, and I know that writers on Next Gen do remember previous episodes, so it seems possible that this could happen. I'm assuming it actually doesn't. Yeah. And it's sad, too, because we'll never see James Cromwell in Star Trek again either.
I know, that's the real shame.
It really is terrible.
So good.
I think was it his twin brother George Cromwell, though, who played Zephram Cochrane? I
think so. I think you're right. You're absolutely right.
You almost never hear about the Georges in the Star Trek canon.
Don't. It's an interesting idea here that Danar can keep eluding the Enterprise, at the beginning in particular. But hasn't the Enterprise computer, again, you go back to the computer, because it should have seen this like dozens of times. Like, oh, they're hiding the magnetic poles. What Riker did in Peak Performance. Oh, they're hiding in a nebula. Oh, they're cloaked. Like go through all of the things on the flow chart to figure out where they would be.
There are two things I'll say about that. First of all, I forgot that Riker did that in Peak Performance, but I do like the fact that Riker remembered it, because that does give a little continuity. Mm-hmm. Certainly continuity that I forgot. Yeah. But it does give it a little continuity. Now, that Data didn't think of it, because you're talking about the computer, and we've talked all the way since the Practical Joker about the possibility that, the computer could be sitting there saying that, but, its muzzle circuit is firmly in place. The computer doesn't get to say what the computer is thinking unless there's some sort of malfunction or we're on the holodeck.
Right.
So you're not wrong about, maybe the computer would know that, but maybe the computer does. And then, like one little subsystem somewhere in the computer, like maybe a food replicator in an unused part of the Enterprise, it's sitting there going, why don't they ask me?
Right. Yeah, it does seem that, because it seems like as soon as you throw the switch to like, okay, scan this area for that ship, and then you don't find anything, the little subroutine that says, and we also have to check the magnetic poles would kick in.
Yeah, except they're not going to let that happen.
Yeah, I know it takes up too much energy.
There may be good reasons for not letting your computers think, John, but we can talk about that later.
Right. And, it seemed like Danar would have some kind of life stain. I mean, I know that that's the premise of the show here, and we have to go with that. But I just thought, does he give off heat? Is there respiration? Is there anything that takes up mass? Anything? It's a good trick that O'Brien gets him, but then they just have no luck keeping him after that.
Well, it's not O'Brien's trick, though. It's Picard. He's like, look, anything that looks big enough to be a guy.
Right.
Bring it over. And, the inside of the whole thing is only big enough for a guy. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So he's going to get whatever he's going to get.
Yeah. Could have been a mannequin of a guy, or it could have been anything.
Could have been, but he would have been inside that mannequin of the guy. It was like a Russian nesting doll thing. It's like, oh, he stole a big ship. Oh, look, a little smaller ship came out. Hey, an even smaller ship than that came out.
Yes.
It's kind of neat.
I'm going to talk about a thing that seems to make sense if you're in charge of security on board the Enterprise. Okay, so if you can use a communicator to say, turn off the shields or turn off the force field, maybe the computer needs to voice verify, or maybe the person on the other end needs to voice verify. Because, literally Danar picks up the communicator from the guy he's just knocked out. It's just sort of like Pee Wee Herman. I
say we let him go.
Right. It's exactly that. Like, turn off the force fields. Oh, okay. Well, somebody said turn off the force fields, so I guess we better do it.
Here's what I've never understood about voice recognition, though. What if you have laryngitis? I mean, because you've got two things going on here, okay? So this is, I don't know who that guy is. We'll call him Ensign Almost Dead Guy. So Ensign Almost Dead Guy is down on the ground, right? But the computer is smart enough to know that his communicator has not left his body, and then it is Ensign Almost Dead Guy's hand that touches the communicator. So that's actually two bits of authentication that have happened at this point. Now, if it was more of a biometric device, then maybe it would know, okay, well, it's Ensign Almost Dead Guy, and it is his hand, but his pulse is like really weak, like he's been knocked out.
Right.
So maybe we go for a third thing, like, what was your mother's maiden name, Ensign Almost Dead Guy?
And
third authentication.
And Ensign Almost Dead Guy's communicator is really only about 6 inches off the ground.
That's true.
Instead,
Well, that might happen though. If somebody floods a hallway with gas, you might hit the dirt and then
you might hit the
deck.
deck. Yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting. Here's the thing. What's funny is we got to go back though, because this was 1990. I mean, right now, you and I personally in 2015 are walking around with certain biometric devices.
Right.
That would look at us, and if we tried to pull that and go, yeah, no, pal, come on, you gotta do better than that.
Right.
But in 1990, just the idea that still it's amazing that, wow, he's just got this little thing that lets him communicate, and it's just like on him. That's still mind blowing in 1990.
Yeah, very true. You know what else is absolutely mind blowing? Huge Jeffries tubes.
Yeah.
Huge.
You get a golf cart through those things easy.
You can.
Kind of amazing.
Yeah, and that's the set that, if I'm not mistaken, gets reused over and over. And if I'm truly not mistaken, I believe it's the same. It's a redress of that set where Scotty knocked his head in Star Trek V.
Really?
Yeah.
Because I thought he was just in a hallway in Star Trek V. Because he was like walking with Kirk, and Kirk says, whatever. And Scotty says, I know it like the back of my hand. Then he hits his head.
And then blam, yeah. Well, it's a redress of that area, and they keep using those angled walls and those curved pieces to rebuild other sets.
Cool.
Yeah. So they keep recycling, like that transporter room. They just keep using that over and over and over again. A lot of decks on the Enterprise. Now, speaking of Star Trek V, we kind of cringed when there were 78 decks.
Yes,
they're in the turbolift shaft.
At least 78 decks.
At least 78.
That turbo
they fly
only went
past
up,
it.
Right, only went up to 78, I think. But we don't get the impression that they're now at the roof of the Enterprise.
Right. So now on this Enterprise, we've got 40 some odd decks, and it's still just absolutely huge. And we get a deck number for engineering. That's 36, with the bridge being 1. I mean, that's quite a hike to get from the bridge to engineering. So now I have to think about that. Every time Picard says, like, Mr. LaForge, come to the bridge. It's like, okay, give me an hour. Because I got to go here, I got to do this thing, I got to go to place, and if somebody stops me in the hallway, that's going to be no good.
Yeah, I kind of want actually either a schematic, or I want to hear that there are many engineering sections. Like, go to the one on 36. Okay, go to a different one. I mean, not necessarily that they all look exactly the same, because how many warp cores can you have on a ship? But
right.
Yeah, I don't. This is a really minor thing to get caught on, but it may start to bug me if we talk about it anymore.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. It gives it scale.
If we talk about it anymore, John. If we talk about it anymore.
And what's interesting is that the saucer section of the Enterprise, about 16 decks.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah, you call me when you're done.
Okay. Hey, let's talk about Danar's motivations here. I mean, and this might be something I'm sure that we'll come back to. Maybe not. But just as a character, I was trying to think about the consistency of what he's doing. So Picard disarms him pretty easily at the end by having everyone else lay down their weapons.
Yeah.
But I wonder if that would really work on Danar, considering what we've already seen him do. I mean, he seems to be acting of his own accord very often, not just when he's under threat, you know? So you could argue it that when he gets beamed on board the first time, it is a threatening situation. He's been pulled out of his ship. This is potentially an enemy vessel, but then he just goes to town. He starts knocking people out, and you know they've taken his weapon away. But it seems like from the beginning, he's doing a lot of like, well, I'm just going to escape. I'm just going to get out. I'm just going to, you know, he's not actually being threatened. And actually, Troy makes some pretty good inroads to humanize him and to relate to him. So I don't know. That's something that left me a little wondering at the end there. You know, I get it. I get that that's why they had to end it that way, with Picard saying, no, he's only acting this way because of what you're doing. But it seemed to me like Danar is also acting of his own accord.
Time now to hunt up the big topics in The Hunted. Yes, I am ashamed of that play on words, but it was just too simple to leave laying there.
So kind of feel like there are a lot of topics to hit on this. And I know that I wrote down several and they're kind of scattered throughout, and you've got a few scattered throughout, but you know, might as well just start with the beginning. You know, I feel like one of the messages here is about the weaponization of your world. So the Andosians are in an arms race. And this new version of armament that they have is genetically augmented people rather than specifically a tank or a gun or an airplane or just some other object. This is the new version of their weapons. I kind of thought about, remember in Encounter at Farpoint, when Q keeps showing up in these different guises to throw in Picard's face humanity's violent and militaristic history. And at one point, he's the future soldier with the drugs that just makes him do whatever he needs to do or kills the pain if he's in pain, you know?
Yeah.
So this seems like the next extension of that, you know? Okay, we'll just create weapons, but now we're creating weapons out of people, you know? And I don't know that is specifically, you know, on that fine a level saying, here's a message, don't create genetically augmented supermen who will become soldiers and take you over. You know, that's a little hard message to swallow. But the idea of weaponizing everything, you know, is certainly a fear, certainly a worry that we have.
Yeah. What's weird is you and I tried to talk in terms of, we try to talk in sort of broader terms, things that are not, you know, sort of the day. Mm. And yet, as we record this, it was only about a month ago, I think, month and a half maybe, that a bunch of like big thinkers. So just to give people context, because, you know, people all the time, like just a couple of weeks ago, we heard from somebody who said, hey, I just found your show and I'm listening to all of them. Mm-hmm. And we started 3 years ago. So, you know, to say as we do this today, I want to give this like an actual time. Okay. So as we record this, it is middle to end of September 2015. It was in July, end of July of 2015, that a bunch of big thinkers, including Stephen Hawking, Tesla Motors founder Elon Musk, Apple co-founder Steve Wozniak, and a whole bunch of other people got together and wrote a letter talking about banning autonomous weapons. The missive unveiled by the Future of Life Institute at the International Joint Conference on Artificial Intelligence in Argentina. I believe the conference was in Argentina. It was not just about artificial intelligence in Argentina. At this joint conference on artificial intelligence, labeled autonomous weapons the third revolution in warfare following gunpowder and nuclear arms. If any major military power pushes ahead with AI weapon development, a global arms race is virtually inevitable, and the end point of this technological trajectory is obvious. Autonomous weapons will become the Kalashnikovs of tomorrow, says the letter, which includes Skype co-founder Jan Tallinn and prominent linguist Noam Chomsky as endorsers. Unlike nuclear weapons, they require no costly or hard-to-obtain raw materials, so they will become ubiquitous and cheap for all significant military powers to mass produce. That is from a Wall Street Journal blog on the 27th of July, 2015. So now just make a super soldier. Yeah, well, no, but now just make a super soldier. I mean, it seems like the whole idea of we're going to make a perfect weapon that we can't control. And whether it's artificial intelligence or whether it's a guy, go to the Manchurian Candidate. I mean, so the U.S. takes all these soldiers, all these people, and turns them into soldiers. And then, of course, they get captured by, I don't think it was ever 100% certain, I guess, because it's Manchurian Candidate, you would be talking about Chinese. But another government captures all these American soldiers and turns at least one of them into sort of a super conditioned soldier that they can just turn on to become a killing machine and then turn off. Except, of course, the Angosians have something here that they can't turn off. And they're looking for somebody else to sort of take care of their problem. It was just, it was weird to me because you talk about weaponizing the planet. And certainly there are concerns about that. In the U.S. in the past year and a half, a lot of the country has been surprised to find how much military-grade equipment local police forces have ended up with. But even there, you're talking about a guy, right? Your local police station, your local police force may have close to a tank, but that close to a tank is at least driven by a guy. Now, sometimes those guys seem to be decent. Sometimes those guys seem to be a little bit less than decent, or maybe a little too tank happy, if you will. But you're still talking about something that is controlled or controllable. And basically the Angosians just sort of create thinking, feeling, killing machines and say, okay, now you be good. And that doesn't necessarily work. Well,
what you're describing is Skynet. It's kind of terrifying.
Yeah, kind of. You're describing Skynet. You're describing any number of things at that point. You're describing Skynet. Yes, you're describing some sort of crazy ideologue. You're describing some sort of zealot in a way. You're describing something without an off switch. And I'm not saying you should be able to turn people off. I'm saying what you were saying. You shouldn't turn people into mindless weapons, because that's pretty much what they turn them into. They become. You said earlier you weren't sure about whether it seemed too easy that Picard was disarming Roga Danar. Well, Roga Danar has come to liken Lunar 5 to death. Mm-hmm. Okay, mm-hmm. He would rather die than go back there, which means he pretty much considers Lunar 5 as death, but he is programmed to survive. So anything that he perceives as a threat to his life, and returning to Lunar 5 would be considered a threat to his life in his mind at that point, would be something that's going to cause him to raise a weapon. And so you say, well, Picard, it seemed too easy that Picard disarmed him at the end. Picard basically made it clear you can't send them back to Lunar 5, because if you try to, you will die and they will die, and nobody wants either of you to die. So, mm-hmm. He disarms him not by saying, oh, just don't point a weapon at him. He says, look, remove all threat, and I'll see you later.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, so that's interesting. I'll kind of buy that, because I guess the element there is the emotional element. That this guy can be programmed to do anything that we want him to do. He can be programmed to survive, but what we can't program is the emotional perception of how he sees his life at Lunar 5, or how he sees his treatment by other people. So yeah, that is sort of an interesting element to throw in there.
They might be able to program that, though. Because that's the other thing that happens here. We find out all the way through, horrible, by the way, that they're like, oh, look, we put it to a vote, and people decided they didn't want to pay the money to fix these guys who saved our way of life. So we're going to send them to Lunar 5, because besides, we may need them to do that again.
Yeah,
it's really,
right.
It's an amazingly brutal episode without being terribly violent. There's nothing like Remek's head debris or anything like that.
No.
It's not a difficult episode to watch, but it's at the same time, it's just surprisingly, I think, in their cold reaction to their brothers, their sons, the soldiers that they created. I think in their cold reaction to that, it's incredibly brutal.
There's nothing wrong about them being concerned about security, and there's nothing wrong about them wanting to have a way to defend themselves.
Right.
clearly this has gotten completely out of hand. Actually, and it's not even artificial intelligence, but I also thought of when you were describing this Wall Street Journal piece, A Taste of Armageddon, because there's the logical extreme. If we just handed everything over to computers that they get to decide how a war gets played out, and then the humanity involved just becomes the pawns of today it's your day to die, right. And so step into the machine, because now it's so neat and pretty that we just let the computers run everything. Picard has a great line here, a matter of internal security, the age-old cry of the oppressor, and I feel like, Ken, we will hear similar words out of Picard's mouth down the road. So,
okay.
Yeah.
I'll take your word for it.
Okay. Now, Data and Danar have a conversation about being programmed, and for that matter, you could say that about anyone, as we have said on this show, simply by going through the process of living. But there's something additional here, that I thought about Danar as this guy going through military training, just as we put people through military training today. They learn how to kill. That this has to be a conditioned thing to do. So you can't just pull somebody off the street and say, here, go do this job. No, it is a learning process. It's conditioning. It's programming to be able to do that. What you can't really control for all the time is what happens after the fact, what happens down the road.
Well, no, you can't control for what happens down the road, but you can prepare and plan. You can try to help somebody through it. You can have an idea of how you're going to take care of them when they return from this horrible thing that you've asked them to do. I mean, because you're right. Certainly there's something analogous about, okay, so they're soldiers, and yes, we have soldiers, and so we're kind of doing the same thing, except again, it's sort of like the whole talk about AI. Honestly, I did not get the sense that Roga Danar ever took orders from anybody. I think whatever happened with whatever war started, he answered the call, and they took him in a room and said, "All right, you're a killing machine now. Don't worry about it, because overall, your thing is to kill these other people. All right, we have a way of life. We need you to protect that. Go." And there, I didn't get the sense that he was part of a regiment, that he was part of a unit. I got the sense that they made all of these amazing killing machines answerable to no one. And so that's how they actually rounded them up and got them on Lunar 5. I don't know, unless they tricked them there. Unless they said no, we're gonna take care of you there, which they in fact do take care of them.
Which they do, yeah.
They just don't give them the freedom for which they fought.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah. This episode is. It's all right. Is there more that you want to hit, or should I? Because honestly, I couldn't watch it without thinking about all of the stuff that we hear about veterans today, and everything from Walter Reed, and the sort of the bad treatment that veterans, or the inadequate treatment that veterans were getting, injured veterans were getting when they returned from that. To, and again, I it's weird because we don't normally do like day of kind of stuff, but I wanted to go and look up, because it's easy for me to sit and say, well, we know we're mistreating our veterans, or we know we're not taking care of them, but I don't know, I don't know exactly in what ways we're not, and in exactly what ways we are. So I went to the National Homeless, a website called nationalhomeless.org, a fact sheet on homelessness and veterans. America's homeless veterans, and this is just here in the States. That's where we are, so that tends to be how we start. America's homeless veterans have served in World War II, the Korean War, Cold War, Vietnam War, Grenada, Panama, Lebanon, Operation Enduring Freedom, which was in Afghanistan, and Operation Iraqi Freedom, which was in Iraq, or the military's anti-drug cultivation efforts in South America. 47% of homeless veterans served during the Vietnam era. More than 67% served our country for at least 3 years, and 33% were stationed in a war zone. So we now, on the streets, and this is only some of what we have, 23% of homeless population, 23% of the homeless population. This is nuts. 23% of the homeless population are vets. 33% of male homeless are vets. 47% was from the Vietnam era, 17% post-Vietnam, 15% pre-Vietnam. 33% were stationed in a war zone, as we said before. 25% have used VA homeless services. 89% received honorable discharge. So 89% did what they were supposed to do, and now we're like, okay, well, go home.
Yeah.
And 76% experience alcohol, drug, or mental health problems. Now, can we fix all of that? No. But there's something strange about the fact that that's happening. And I couldn't help watching this thinking, the thing that was weird to me was I was trying to remember in what context this episode would have been written, because this was in 1990.
Yeah.
And remind me, Operation Desert Storm was in 91?
91, yeah.
Okay, so we weren't worried about those veterans yet. Plus, we tend to sort of gloss over them in our minds. I mean, years and years later, like a decade later, we find out there were actually some problems from veterans who served or regarding veterans who served in Operation Desert Storm. But in the immediate aftermath of that, we were like, wow, that was easy. That was an incredibly easy war. Look at that. But then it turns out this was actually written before that.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is based on like Platoon, Full Metal Jacket, Hamburger Hill, that kind of thing. I mean, this is part of that wave, because for a long time we did do what they're doing on Angosia 3. It's like, oh, Vietnam. Yeah, you were in Vietnam. Hey, look over there. I mean, we pretty much just sort of distracted ourselves from it. I guess it was the mid-'80s, probably starting with Platoon, that just burst onto America's consciousness. Although you could also say that Billy Joel's song Goodnight Saigon off of the hit album Nylon Curtain actually woke a lot of people up to what a crappy existence it was for a lot of people. It's brutal. And what's amazing is you would like to think so this episode was in 1990. You'd like to think, well, here we are 25 years later, and thank goodness we got all that taken care of. And we're not even close to getting all that taken care of.
You know, so you mentioned Full Metal Jacket, and that came out in 1987.
Okay.
And so let's think about Private Pile.
Vincent D'Onofrio. Absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing. My goodness. Stanley Kubrick. That movie. Whoa.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. It's incredibly.
And what was the one? I mean, this even got down to Sean Penn and Michael J. Fox. Casualties of War, I believe, was that one. I mean, this goes on and goes on and goes on. As far as like, all of a sudden, it sort of exploded on the national consciousness in our movies and our TV and things like that, in ways that we had spent. We had really spent a good decade and a half trying not to think about it. Thanks, Hollywood. But sorry, you were saying, think about Private Pile.
No, I was just thinking, Private Pile, I think about it as this guy who is trained to do everything that he is supposed to do as a soldier, but then breaks, just absolutely can't handle it and uses what he has been taught. He has now been taught about weapons. He's been taught about violence. He has been taught all of these things. So I see, it's not the same, of course, but I see a parallel there with Danar. I feel like it's an additional part of the story then that we're talking about what happens to veterans when they come home. But part of that complicating factor is, okay, well, what have we set these what have we set these soldiers up to be? What have we set them up to be able to do? And what is their psychology when they come back?
So that's interesting, because I feel like it's less a story about what is their psychology when they come back than what are we doing about it, or what are we doing for them.
No, I know. I mean, I think that this particular episode, The Hunted, it doesn't go deeply into the psychology of what happens to them, but they're also laying the groundwork. They're creating these, like you said, they're creating these killing machines that don't answer antibody, that even the perception of a threat makes that part of them switch on, that they have no moral compunction about, killing and or escaping and or killing if that means part of the escape. So that's sort of laying the groundwork for what's happening. But then what does that aftermath mean when they come back? What do we do about that when they come back? So this, I think, is the big part of the episode. It's looking at the terrible history of how we treat veterans of war. And we talk about how we support the troops, but there is no consensus on how much or what kind of support should be shown after their return. So what you're describing with these statistics is just the horrible numbers of what's going on, but then it becomes a politicized issue as well. and it shouldn't be, which is incredibly unfortunate.
Or even a question of money. I mean, and that was horrific to hear the Angosians say, like, look, we asked the people, and it was going to cost too much. Yeah. So we just sent them that way instead.
Yeah, and just pretend like they're not there.
Wow. Can you imagine if computers were just allowed to pipe up with their own thoughts and words from time to time? That would be crazy.
It's that time of the show where we sort of sum up what we've done so far. Not what we've done, because all we've done is record a podcast. We sum up what's happened with the episode, some of the points that we've talked about, and whether or not they all hold up today as an episode. Let's say. I feel like this is almost a silly question to ask, but sometimes you surprise me with your answers, John. So, The Hunted. Does this episode hold up?
It holds up. I'm not. I don't think it's an amazing episode, and here's why. There are a lot of people who say, "Oh, this is my favorite," or "It's among my favorites," or within my top 5 or top 10. When you and I talked about The Defector, we both had the same reaction. We watched the episode and we said, oh, okay, it's an episode about a defector. And then we went back and watched it over and over again and really got into the performances and really got into the nuance of what was going on there. Mm-hmm. With this one, I didn't have that experience. I watched the episode and I thought, okay, they're talking about big issues and it's produced well. But when I went back and rewatched it, I didn't feel like I got anything necessarily new out of that. There was nothing additional that really sucked me in. So here's what I like. I like that it tackles the big, important issues. There's a lot of them. And I feel like, again, we just kind of scratched the surface of the depths that you could get into about this. There's good action. There's good acting. What I don't like is that it sort of feels like Star Trek by numbers. You know, we sort of end with spelling out the problem and preaching to the opposition. Mm-hmm. So now I really appreciate and I like Picard's out in this situation. You know, is it really a prime directive thing? Not really. They're already involved. They're already in contact. It kind of doesn't matter at that point. But Picard's got his out, and that's fine. I also thought of Space Seed while watching this. And maybe that's not coincidental since Ira was a fan of the original series. But I thought about Khan. You know, Khan is genetically engineered to be what he is, to be powerful and intelligent and take over the Enterprise, if that's going to be his out.
Yeah, but we didn't make Khan. No. I've said before that I said just a minute ago, actually, that your answers sometimes surprise me, and they do here again. An episode that you and I split on pretty decidedly was the Omega Glory. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And what I liked about the Omega Glory was the Kirk speech. I liked the fact that at the end of it, it was basically whoever wrote the Omega Glory tapping on the screen and saying to whoever was sitting there watching Star Trek, hey, you're screwing up. Here's how you fix it. And that's what this episode was to me. Down to, I joked in the recap, it's time for a Kirk speech. From a bunch of people. Because that would have been a Kirk speech in the original series.
Oh, sure.
And honestly, there are a lot of people who hate Let That Be Your Last Battlefield because it's a little too on the nose. This episode is very on the nose, but I thought this episode was very well acted. Mm-hmm. Very well acted. To the point, I mean, Patrick Stewart does not have anything nearly as awesome to talk about as he did in The Defector, but man, it may be time to stop talking about Patrick Stewart's acting. We may now have come to a point in Next Gen where it's only going to make sense to talk about Patrick Stewart's acting when it's bad.
Right. Because we've hit peak Stewart.
We have. Even when he doesn't really have much to say, he still brings a tremendous amount of gravitas when he says it. And it's almost like he finally found Picard in season 3 somehow. Or he finally decided, I don't have to be Picard, I have to be Patrick Stewart being Picard. Or something along those lines. Because there's just there's an effortless ease with almost, or a seemingly effortless ease with almost everything he does with Picard at this point. And so that I thought was great. I glossed over Act 4 in the recap because it was just a lot of, action. And it would be silly to go through all of that action because ultimately it doesn't matter. Ultimately what happens is he says, I'm going to get away if I can. He gets away. He steals the ship.
Right.
But it was a great action sequence. I mean, it really was just a fantastic. And I was also taken in the beginning when it's like, oh, he's there. Oh, he's not there. Okay, but no, he's there. Oh, he's not there. Oh, where the heck is this guy? I mean, I thought it was a well-paced story. I thought it was a well-told story. And I'm okay with the fact that we actually do have a you see Timmy at the end of this episode. We get a moral handed to us at the end of this episode. Wow, look at you. You created this killing thing, and now you're not willing to take care of it. And oddly enough, that's going to come back and bite you in the behind. I mean, and that is absolutely the message that they were telling. What I find even make it hold up even more, and what I find it even more horrifying is they were telling that story, 16 years after the end, or 15 years after the end of the Vietnam War, 1 year ahead of Operation Desert Storm, and I can't do math very well, 13 years ahead of Operation Enduring Freedom, or whatever we called the thing in Iraq. I mean, this happened, and 15 years later, we're like, wow, we should really deal with the fact that this happened. And unfortunately, nobody thought, and maybe we shouldn't make it happen again, or maybe we should make sure it doesn't. And so for you, maybe it's a little too on the nose, but the problem is we still need to be hit on the nose with it. And I'm kind of glad this episode does.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Like I said, I love the fact that it's talking about these issues. I love the fact that this is Star Trek doing what Star Trek does, which is, pulling a societal, a social issue, a political issue, and throwing it in your face. I think that's great. There's just something about the production of this episode that doesn't completely fire for me. But that's okay. I still give it a pass in that respect. I just think, like, if you handed the Defector to me and you handed the Hunted to me, I'm going to watch the Defector.
Well, no, the Defector is a more fun episode.
Sure.
The Defector is a more fun episode, but I don't get to the end of this episode. Like, I asked the question when we were talking about the Defector of, like, okay, does the fact that he was wrong negate his nobility? And there's still a question at the end of that. I'm okay with the fact that at the end of this episode, there's absolutely no question.
Right.
I mean, there's a question of how they should have handled what they handled, but there's no question of whether or not they should have tried to handle it.
Sure.
They should have tried to handle it, and they absolutely didn't, unless you count, oh, go away.
Yeah.
I don't think, oh, go away is actually handling something. I think it's just, trying to do the whole out of sight, out of mind thing.
By the way, you mentioned Let That Be Your Last Battlefield.
I did.
And it's interesting because the other ending of this episode, had time and budget allowed, would have been violence. It would have been a shootout, and Picard would have left them to do that to each other.
Well, Picard did leave them to do that to each other. We just didn't see it. I mean, at the end, Picard's like, wow, I think they'll probably be fine.
Come back.
I think they're going to choose to not shoot each other.
Back in a week.
Yeah, we'll see.
So, let's talk about messages then, because I think we've hit all of them.
Yeah. I don't have them written out succinctly, though. I'm sorry. Maybe, ultimately, basically, I guess it might be, let's try not killing. But then, okay, well, if we have to, let's make sure we take care of the people who do that for us.
Yeah.
It boiled down to its very basic. I mean, there's actually, I don't want to go eco on it, but this is almost another cleanup episode, okay? If you make a mess, clean it up, or that may come back to bite you. And yes, you can apply that to any number of things. In this case, we will certainly apply it to the people that we arm to go take care of something that we want taken care of.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I saw... there are big messages, and then there are the really kind of on-the-nose messages here. The big messages, even more so than the Defector, we're seeing this problematic buildup of military force. It's this Frankenstein's monster let out of his cage. That's what happens when we do this. When we just build, create new ways to destroy each other, and then let them go out into the world. And it also is sort of saying that, okay, when we have a militaristic or violent answer for our problems, soon our problems will only look like ones that can be resolved by violence. We kind of get to that with this. But we also have Star Trek's very strong current of compassion for humanity in this show. The enemy is misunderstood, and it's something of our own doing. Now, specifically, it's not our doing in this episode, but again, Star Trek's not real. We're speaking in metaphor.
Right.
You know, this is an enemy of our own creation. It is a problem that we created, and like you said, we have to clean it up. We have to take responsibility for those actions.
And forgive me, and I hate to say we have to clean it up in such cold terms. These are people that we have tasked with doing something absolutely abhorrent.
Yeah.
And when they go ahead and do that thing for us, and we know nothing about this war. There are people who, I mean, make it a war over which we have no question. World War II. Because you can bring up Vietnam and people will say, that was this. You can bring up Operation Enduring Freedom and people will say, oh, that was that. And, you know, we may agree with that. We may disagree with that. So let's make it a war about which we have no question. World War II. And there are even probably some people who will say, well, we didn't really. But whatever. I don't know what those people. Because it was like it was Japan on one side, Germany on the other. We're sort of kind of in the middle eventually. Right. And so let's, you know, not do. Okay, so when you task people with protecting you, you should take care of them. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. I mean, Star Trek actually has this crazy idea that we should take care of everybody anyway. But in this particular episode, they're saying, look, seriously, though, if these people take care of you, if they lay their lives on the line for you, you know, ask them what they want when they come back. Ask them how you can help them. Don't just decide what's going to happen for them. Although, I mean, you got to say the Angosians, when you read those stats that I just did earlier, the Angosians at least are taking care of them. Maybe not in the way that they want, but I mean, the food, clothing, shelter, comfort. These are the 4 things he mentions. We're missing on 1, 2, 3, 4 of those with a lot of these people. Yeah. That we've done this with. It's just...
Well, I mean, in any society, you can sort of pinpoint this idea of, you know, throwaway people. You know, the people who have come back from a war that maybe wasn't popular, or now they're experiencing problems that have to be dealt with, or whatever. Even for the homeless people who aren't war veterans, you know, because going by the statistics, there are many who are not as well.
Yes.
But this idea that you speak to this on a macro level, and at Star Trek saying, these are people. You can't sweep this problem under the rug. You actually have to deal with those people and treat them humanely. You know, whether you look at it as prisoners or you know, just or the homeless or veterans or whatever that case may be, we can't just say, okay, we will ignore this problem and pretend like it will go away.
Well, the one good thing is, thank goodness TV was there to solve it.
Yeah, and it did. So then we get to move on.
Yay! Yeah. Yes, we do. But not before we say Mission Log is produced by Roddenberry Entertainment. Executive producer Rod Roddenberry. You can find out more at roddenberry.com. And as I've said before, there's just all kinds of fun stuff there. There's other movies they're working on. There are graphic novels. There are links to the Roddenberry Foundation, which is you know, working anywhere between 100 and 300 years out. Don't believe me? Find out for yourself. Roddenberry.com. For more exciting Star Trek podcasts, check out Trek FM. That is on the lines at trek.fm. And for the latest in Star Trek news and discussion, be sure to visit trekmovie.com.
Next week, we're back with The High Ground.
Some of the music for Mission Log provided by Warp 11, online at warp11.com, and from the album Messages, by Key Theory, free to download at kitheory.com. Accommodations for half of the Mission Log team provided by Lunar 5. Food, clothing, shelter, comfort. It is not 5-star. It is Lunar 5. And transmission.